Hello everyone and welcome to our Fireside Chat today, and I'm thrilled to be delighted by the Conservative MP and former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Julian Smith. It is lovely to have you back in Northern Ireland.
Great to be here, Sarah.
Now, you made a really big impression in your 204 days as Secretary of State in Northern Ireland. You did something that a lot of people fail to be able to do. You got us talking again, and under your reign, so to speak, Powersharing was restored after 3 years of no government. Well, can you take us back to what that was like?
Well, look, first of all, it's fantastic to be back in Northern Ireland. Fantastic that the Powersharing government is up and running, and not only up and running, but it has played such a key role and done really very well, I think, in its decision making around COVID. And I also want to say how sorry I am to those families in Northern Ireland who have lost loved ones and who've been affected by this horrendous disease. But I think the executive has made a difference, and if it hadn't have been there, I think there would have been quite a lot of trouble. When I first became Secretary of State, almost to the day a year ago today, the big focus was on getting the executive back up and running, because at that point we were facing a potential no-deal Brexit, and I was pretty clear that that was not a good position for Northern Ireland to be in. We needed to preserve the Good Friday Agreement, we needed to preserve the soft border. And also, we'd gone for nearly 3 years without any political decision-making. The civil service had worked incredibly hard, done very good work, but not having those political decisions was having a huge impact, not least in the health crisis, as you know, first nurses strike in British political history, and waiting lists of about 300,000 people for healthcare. So those things were driving me from the start, but initially there wasn't a huge agreement from the other parties on pushing forward with talks. But as it got towards Christmas, as we had that health strike, after we had the UK general election, after the confidence and supply agreement was no longer operating in London, we managed to have a push before Christmas, and then a much more accelerated push after January, with, I guess, the political parties here having to face the question, if they didn't reform the executive, I was under a duty to call a new assembly election, and myself and Simon Coveney, the Irish Foreign Minister, had to work hard to put the agreement forward. We put the agreement forward on January the 9th in a very cold evening in front of Stormont, eventually within that weekend the party said yes, and I was delighted that all the political parties are on board.
Then there was that incredulity, just that you, in the next cabinet reshuffle, you were no longer Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Did that come as a huge shock to you personally?
Well, it came as a bit of a shock, but also I had to be quite vocal about my views on the impact of no-deal Brexit. I had to be, I think, quite vocal about the fact that we had to maintain very strong relationships with Ireland. The Prime Minister of the day is always under complete freedom as who he has in his cabinet. So I was very grateful for the opportunity to serve here. I found the people here exceptionally warm. I felt that I was able to make a difference with the executive, with the bill to provide recompense for child abuse victims, the Troubles pension that we put forward, abortion reform, same-sex marriage. And I was very pleased and felt very lucky to have been given that opportunity to get through within 204 days so many things. So, it was a shame, but the Prime Minister has to make those calls, and he has my full support.
I know there was such concern afterwards, and the thing was, it was coming from all sides. It was coming from the Irish government, it was coming from nationalist politicians, it was coming from unionist politicians. They were all sorry to see you go. What do you think you had? And I'm thinking back to previous Secretary of States, and it reminded me a little bit of the impact that Mo Mowlam had to bring people together. How could you keep people talking and help them to reach agreement?
Well, I think I felt it was very important to be fair-minded, treat people equally. I'm obviously a committed unionist, but I also feel very strongly that you have to ensure that you are dealing equally with all parts of the community in Northern Ireland. And so I had spent, since that start point a year ago today, I worked hard to try and develop trust amongst all the political parties, and they, in their turn, were actually very good at trusting me. And I think that did provide a basis. It took a long time, but it's a basis of moving forward for that agreement. What was worrying me before we came to an agreement, and what I find so amazing and exciting now that the parties are working together, not without blips, but working together, is that they weren't doing a lot of talking between themselves in December last year and in January. So Simon Coveney and myself and the governments were having to do a lot of that brokering of the agreement. They trusted me to do that. We obviously need to encourage them to do that more themselves, and I noticed that they're now having more regular party political meetings because there's so many decisions to take as we move forward in the next phase of COVID, that we need these parties to be trusting each other. They gave it some trust to me, to Simon, but we need them to be talking and trusting each other. It doesn't mean they agree, but we need that dialogue to happen.
Now, we are still hurtling towards a no-deal Brexit. Are those concerns still as real as they were?
Well, we've got the Irish, the Northern Irish Protocol, and that was something I supported. I worked to ensure we did everything I could to support a deal, but also I'm confident that we will get a deal with a future relationship with the EU. I think everybody wants to have one. I think the Prime Minister wants to have one, and I think and feel strongly that there is every opportunity to get one. It's obviously, as with all negotiations, can be bumpy at times, but I'm quietly confident that we will get there.
Whenever you look at your social media, I was having a little search through your Twitter feed. You're still greatly involved in Northern Ireland. You're not Secretary of State, but you're involved. People are reaching out to you and you're retweeting things. Does Northern Ireland get under your skin?
Well, I think it's bound to get under your skin. It's a very politically engaged place. I think it's more politically engaged than any other part of the country, probably because of what many people have been through, what their families have been through. It's also a beautiful place. There's so much going on here. I loved being here with my family and developed relationships, even though it was a short period of time, across the political spectrum. And I committed at the time I became Secretary of State to support people, to be here for people, to work with them in any way I can. I'm, as you say, not Secretary of State. I'm not the First Minister. I'm not Deputy First Minister, but I will do everything I can to support people and organisations in Northern Ireland. I'm still an MP. There's still a platform, at Westminster. Good relationships with my government colleagues, and I'll support people in any way I can here.
You seem like a very empathetic person, and it wasn't just the politicians that were perhaps sorry to see you go, and you've touched on the other campaigns that you've helped the victims of historical abuse in Northern Ireland and further afield, and when it comes to issues around equality, you seem to champion the underdog.
Well, I think on the issues of equality on abortion and same-sex marriage reform, and I know abortion has been particularly controversial, but Westminster ultimately, in the absence of the executive, took a decision to move forward with that, and I was supportive of that. I do think that it's important for women to have similar rights in London and to London and Dublin here, and also for same-sex couples to be able to marry. With the child sex abuse victims, this was the most sort of important thing I think I've ever done. That and the Troubles pension that isn't quite there, but we did a lot of work on, because these people, whether they're victims of the Troubles or victims of child abuse, have been waiting for years to get recognition. And working with these groups, working with these individuals, just seeing what they've been through is heartbreaking, and is I felt very motivated to try to help. We got the bill through to provide recompense to the child abuse victims, and I hope on the Troubles pension that will be completed soon.
You're from Scotland originally. It's hard to tell. There's a little trace of an accent, but you were brought up in Stirling, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm from a small village called Fintry, which is just near Stirling. It's about 600 people. and very beautiful, and was a great place to be brought up.
So how come you became a Conservative MP and now live, I suppose, in England?
Yeah, so I had from an early age wanted to enter politics, but I went into business to begin with, and then had my own business. And I was in my late 30s. I'd been lucky in business. I'd done well in terms of building my companies up, and had been for a long time. I'd enjoyed listening to the news, listening to Big Ben at the start of the news, and felt I wanted to contribute in public service. And I had links to the north east of England, where my family is from, and I managed to win the seat of Skipton and Ripon, a beautiful part of North Yorkshire, and have been the MP there for 10 years.
There's been a lot of talk about leadership, and never before, I think, have people needed leaders, especially when we've been facing this global pandemic, especially during modern times. When you look at the leadership that we've had in these islands, I suppose, who have you been most impressed by?
Well, I think the executive, all the parties of the executive have done a really, really good job. Remember, December last year, we were struggling to get everybody into an agreement. Even in early January, I'd come over with my team on the 1st of January. I wasn't very popular. New Year's Day, come on, team, let's start these negotiations. And parties were still, I think, struggling to come to an agreement. But they've now led Northern Ireland, Arlene, Michelle, Nicola Mallon, Naomi Long, and all through this very, very difficult period of COVID. Robin Swan has done a great job as health minister, I think, quite understated, but he's pushed forward. So I think there has been really good leadership. I think the challenge now is obviously from the trauma of the initial crisis. It's going to get difficult economically. It's going to get difficult in terms of avoiding a second wave. And there will continue to be lots of decisions that need to be made, and I just hope that the executive is able to continue to meet regularly as political parties to take the time to work through their own priorities. We still haven't got the programme for government. We need to get that nailed down, and there will be a huge number of decisions, and we just need to support them in continuing to make those decisions in the best interest of the people in Northern Ireland.
What about your own party and your own leader and your own boss in Number 10? How has Boris Johnson done as Prime Minister during this?
So look, I think the team has been working flat out. I've observed them, I've been in touch with them to deliver in the most difficult period for Britain in decades. I'm sure there'll be lots of analysis in the future about what bits could have gone better, what bits couldn't have, have gone well. But I mean, the speed of things, the need to act, and the number of decisions to be made, I think, has been huge. The economic interventions that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have made to support people through furlough, to support businesses, to provide loans to organisations to keep going through a period where they're not getting their revenues, have been, I think, amongst the best in the world. I think the government has been doing everything it can to get the country through this period. But it is, in the same way as it's going to be difficult in Northern Ireland, it is going to be tough going forward. And I'm worried about making sure that we balance maintaining and keeping people healthy, but we do need to get the economy moving again and keep jobs and keep making sure people have got jobs to go to. But it is a difficult balance.
Would you like to have been making those decisions as a Prime Minister?
Well, I think I have been supportive on the backbenches, and as I've said, I'm very grateful for the opportunity I've been given, and I've been trying to support in any way I can during this period. But I think being the job of leading in such a crisis is extremely stressful, extremely important, and I'm pleased I haven't been having to do that during this period. I think it's been a tough period, and I pay tribute to all the leaders who have been involved in trying to make these decisions.
And then, of course, senior government figures affected by COVID-19, the Prime Minister himself ending up in hospital. What was that like as a time for the party?
Well, I think it was clearly extremely difficult to see your Prime Minister and then other senior ministers getting ill. I think that was very, very worrying, and I think that we've got to learn from that, and but it showed how easy it was to transmit this virus. But they worked. Prime Minister Boris Johnson worked through that, has been got back up to speed quickly. But it just showed how what a disease this is, and how we've got to be extremely careful going forward, because we have reduced the transmission rate, but we, as we're seeing in other European countries, we need to be very careful.
What has lockdown been like for you then? Where have you been through all of this?
So it has been an experience where I've been able to spend more time with my family. Luckily, my family hasn't been directly affected by COVID, but the worries of sort of looking after parents, making sure that you're doing your bit at home, and then obviously as an MP, it's been very busy with speaking to constituents, speaking to constituency business owners who, and then people who wanted help. So it's been actually, I think, for most MPs, one of the busiest times, in recent years, because of the amount of casework and the amount of people that need help and just are looking for support.
I mean, it's very early to reflect at this stage, but a lot of people have been perhaps finding out that the slowing down a little. I know you've been busy, but you've maybe been working in different ways, virtually, like our TEDx summer camp is happening right now. But what do you think you learned about yourself?
Well, I think for me personally, it was an opportunity to spend, at times more time with my family than I've been able to in the last few years. I was government chief whip, then Northern Ireland secretary. It was a very intense period. It was sort of 7 days a week, probably 18-hour days, and so I have a young child, and it was a good opportunity to spend more time with my family. I think it has made people reflect upon their priorities and what they want to do. But also, I'm very aware that there were so many people during that period of work, so many people in Northern Ireland, in the food production industry, farmers, healthcare workers, care workers, social workers who were on the front line. Some of us were lucky to be able to work from home. Others didn't have that choice. And I think what it made me feel very aware of is that how reliant we are on, I was aware of this already, but I think it was doubly aware of how reliant we are on people who, a whole range of industries who didn't have a choice and had to keep going out to work.
What do you think are the positive lessons that have come out of this pandemic?
Well, I think it's shown as a country that we are able to deal with a crisis and support people. If you look at the voluntary networks that's sprung up throughout the United Kingdom, throughout Ireland, if you look at the help that and the priorities we set in place to help the vulnerable, to provide food, to provide support, and then the economic interventions, I think all of that showed that we were and did and will operate as one country. I think it's so important to make sure everybody is protected, and I felt that there was a lot of good, an amazing sort of community work. I saw it in my constituency, and I think it's been happening here. Just so many voluntary groups just giving time.
You've already mentioned Brexit, and we've already mentioned that we are heading towards a no-deal Brexit, but you say you're confident there will be a deal. I suppose for a lot of people, they've maybe taken their eye off the ball at this time. There were bigger things to concentrate on, but what's happening behind the scenes now to get this deal?
Well, David Frost, the Prime Minister's chief negotiator, and his team are negotiating hard with the EU. I think, as we've seen in Northern Ireland, there's work being done to finalise the Northern Ireland Protocol, and I hope we'll be seeing news of progress on that soon. And I voted Remain at the referendum, but I've spent the last 3 years as Chief Whip and then as Northern Ireland Secretary trying to make the case that we do need to deliver on the result, the referendum result, but also make sure that it's as straightforward and as low friction and challenge for business as possible. So what I'm hoping that we'll see is that through these negotiations, that both sides have a practical approach to how to handle trade, goods and export arrangements to make sure that businesses do not have too many additional burdens over and above the challenges they're having to deal with COVID, many challenges at the moment that they're facing.
How difficult is it always to toe the party line? You just said there that you were a Remainer,
Yep.
and then you have to say, okay, well we're leaving now, so that's where I am. But at the time when the referendum was happening, you said you'd real concerns because you didn't know what it would mean for your children and grandchildren if we left. You still have those concerns.
Well, I think at the time I had come from a business background. I felt it was important generally to avoid further frictions. I benefited from the single market for my businesses, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Was my view. Now that was put to a referendum. It was the most sizable referendum in British political history, and as Chief Whip, I felt it was quite important to help implement that. But I think that my goal in supporting the Prime Minister Theresa May in that was to ensure that it was done in as business friendly way as possible, and that also we maintained our relationships. I suppose my view was, I made the case. I was part of the group making the case that failed, and there was a responsibility to help implement it, but to make sure that was done in a proportionate way. And I worry that relationships and international relationships with Dublin have been stressed by this Brexit period. And I hope now that we can get it completed, and we can get back to more normalised relationships, and that we can move on from it, because I guess what I saw as Chief Whip was a lot of time was spent on this. I think whatever one's view, we just need to sort of move forward and make the best out of it, and I think we can do, and I'm confident that we will.
You're a father, you said earlier. What are your hopes for the world that your child will grow up and be an adult in?
Well, I think there are huge opportunities for young people. The pace of change is phenomenal. I mean, you talked about social media earlier and technology. I mean, I am so far behind. I'm sure you're much better than I am.
No.
But I am so far behind on that. There's so much learning to do. There's so many opportunities for young people in that whole space. I want to see the green agenda moving forward. You kind of stand by a street now and you look at all the emissions coming out of taxis and cars and buses. There's so much we can do to make the climate change action happen even faster. It's amazing going into schools, hearing just how key this issue is for young people. But I also hope that, as I've said on Brexit and some of the challenges of recent years, that Britain, United Kingdom, will continue and almost even more play a strong part in global relationships. I think COVID has taught us that it is these international relationships that are key. We as a country have given huge amounts of money in international development, Syria to Africa to other parts of the world. We've historically played an important role in international organisations, and I think it's really important that we continue to do that a bit, because for our children, grandchildren, being good global citizens, whether it's for climate change, reducing emissions, or for dealing with crises like COVID, I think that's vital.
So do you watch TED Talks?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and do you get a lot from them?
So I think they're really helpful. I think there's so many topics. I don't think I've actually got a favourite one, and I don't want to nail my colours to which particular one I most like. But I think it's a fantastic way of getting information and hearing people that are true experts.
Mm-hmm. It's about spreading ideas. Would you ever think about giving a TED Talk?
I'd be happy to give a TED Talk, as long as you advise me on how best to do it.
Oh, I'll do that, no problem. Can we book you then for the next one that we're doing?
Absolutely.
I'll hold you to that.
Okay.
When you come back to Northern Ireland, what's the first thing you want to do?
I'd like to say that it is not relating to food, but it is generally related to food. I love my food, whether it's Ulster fries, whether it's tray bakes, whether it's having a pint in a bar. But I think the main thing is just meeting people, meeting friends that I've got to know. I've just been here for the last couple of days, and it's just been fantastic meeting people. I think we all probably feel lockdown has run its course in terms of our relationships with people and wanting to see our friends again. So it is a combination of food, the odd drink, and spending time with people.
But you do like an Ulster fry.
I love an Ulster fry.
Do you have beans with your Ulster fry?
I don't have beans from Ulster fry. But I luckily, when I was Secretary of State, found somewhere that sold a mini Ulster fry, which allowed me to...
A little healthier?
Exactly.
Well, given that the Prime Minister is now telling us we all need to be healthier, that was a good answer.
It was, yes, and I've been trying to do my training during lockdown, but with limited effect.
Yes, well, I think you're looking very trim, and it's lovely to have you back in Northern Ireland. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Julian Smith, thank you.
Thank you, sir.